streets last year across the country as a result of homelessness. Now, homelessness is not an individual choice, it's a political choice. It's a choice being made every day by those in power. It's the choice made in every cut to welfare benefits for the worst off and every cut to mental health and addiction services. And it stems from every choice to let empty buildings stand, accruing capital for a few while human beings sit outside shivering. Every choice to let rent soar while wages stagnate. Every choice by public figures to use stigmatising and dehumanising rhetoric. Every choice to prioritise profits over people. Now, going back to the motion itself, so the stats here are slightly different because we've talked just about rough sleeping. So the real figure, for example, according to local authorities, and again this was before the pandemic, was around 28,000. That's just rough sleeping. So as we say, the figure of people homeless in hostels, sofa surfing, etc., is much higher than that. So now most people know that there was a programme called Everybody In, where the government gave local authorities additional money to house people. That ended in July. Some local authorities are doing their best to still provide accommodation for some people, but that very much varies according to local authority. In fairness, Birmingham have done their best to keep as many people as possible in accommodation. One of the issues the resolution talks about is the no recourse to public funds, which the recently passed immigration bill continues to prevent local authorities from supporting these individuals. So if I can give you an example of somebody I know who works for one of the homeless charities. They had an individual who comes to the UK due to sexual abuse and domestic violence. They were actually living in a women's refuge, but because their asylum status was denied, they then faced being thrown out onto the street. And are now at the mercy of trying to get some sort of charity support, and that they're not entitled to legal aid either. So that person potentially will be sleeping rough within the next couple of weeks, unless they get some support from a charity organisation, which isn't guaranteed. So no recourse to public funds was suspended temporarily during lockdown, but that's changed now. We know that some councils as well are not doing their best to keep individuals in accommodation. We also know that although the government gave councils additional money for people who were homeless at the start of lockdown, people have become homeless during lockdown as a result of the issues and various financial burdens. There are people who've become homeless, there are people who've got into debt, and so on. And those people haven't necessarily had access to the funds coming through. We know that's only going to get worse. We know the eviction ban has, the ban on evictions has ended, so there's going to be a backlog of evictions coming through the courts. We know the furlough scheme is due to end soon, so of course a lot of employers are going to say that people need to go back to work if they have to stay at home because they've got caring issues or relatives who become ill because of coronavirus. That's going to cause difficulties for them. We know that child poverty has increased during the pandemic as well. Families have had to go without paying bills and rent to provide things like laptops for the children to still be able to access education. All of these issues have an impact on homelessness. Now, the Labour Homeless Campaign is standing in solidarity with people experiencing homelessness. We do a lot of work against the criminalisation of homelessness. We did a lot of work on the 2019 manifesto. We work in conjunction with other groups, renters, unions, the Labour campaign for council housing and so on. Just a couple of points on the resolution. At the end, you can see this branch resolves to condemn the hostile environment and the abolition of no recourse to public funds. So it's saying that anyone who's homeless should be able to access services. Campaign against criminalisation. We had plans to criminalise homelessness here in Birmingham last year, which we successfully stopped. Already in Dudley nearby, we've got plans to put a similar public space protection order in to try and criminalise activities that people associate with homelessness. Now at the very bottom it's asking you to affiliate to the Labour Homeless Campaign. Just to let you know, there's no charge for doing that. What it means is that if you agree to put this motion through tonight, you will appear on our website. The Birmingham Trades Council supports us, and to campaign for the adoption of the Homeless Bill of Rights by the local council. I believe I did send a copy of the Homeless Bill of Rights through. We're asking all local authorities to adopt that, and it's pretty much very basic human rights really for people who are rough sleeping and homeless. This is a really time-specific issue. We know that overnight accommodation is going to have less temporary beds over the winter, obviously because of social distancing. And obviously, as we say, with the financial implications of on many individuals who are already struggling because of the pandemic, sadly, we expect to see more people potentially lose their homes over the winter as well. Please do support this motion. We'd be really, really grateful for your support. And if it does go through tonight, if you can pass it through to other trade union branches, Labour Party branches, and wherever you think you might get it through, that would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you once again for letting me speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is anyone prepared to speak against the resolution? If you can indicate on your chat line, please, if you're any delegate, I will point out any delegate would like to speak against. No? Okay. Stuart? Stuart, can you unmute?
Yeah, I think formally, and you have to really have an executive member to propose it, but I just wanted to say a couple of words. Even the mainstream press are talking about predictions of 4 million people unemployed as a result of the COVID crisis. It's now quite legal for landlords to evict people, and I notice Momentum have said they're going to support, I mean, I believe it when I see it, but physical campaigns to stop their evictions, which I think the trade union movement should also support. So I think it's a big crisis coming down the road, and I think it's excellent that we've had a speaker from the homeless campaign, and I think it's something that we need to be focusing and pressing, particularly Labour authorities, to have provisions to stop this appalling sort of experience of people in the next period. So I propose and support the resolution.
Thank you, Stuart, for reminding me about procedure as well. But nevertheless, and do we have a seconder from the executive or delegates?
Grant Fletcher.
Grant Fletcher. Okay, thank you. So it's nominated and seconded. Now delegates only, please. If you can switch on your videos and we know who you are. All those in favour, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let me just flip the screen. 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, that's it. Okay. Any against? That's 12. 4. Any against? Drop your hands if you've already voted.
I think Ian, three people have also raised their hand in the chat line as well, in the participants. So we got 15, I think.
No, that's a question. No, that's not a vote. It's a question. That is.
No, not a question. They actually put their hand up as well.
Wow.
Okay, they've got 9.
Anyway, I've counted 12. Anyone like to vote against? No. No one in the chat box either. And any abstentions? Let me just flip the screen again. No. Therefore, it is carried. Thank you. That resolution is now carried and supported by the Birmingham City.
Can I just remind anybody who just joined us that we are recording this video, and if you don't want to appear, please remove your video. And if you don't want your voice to be recorded, please do not speak while the recording is being displayed on the screen.
Okay. Now, second item on the agenda, we have a guest speaker tonight, Jules Todd. We're talking to us about Climate Action Network West Midlands. Okay, Julian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen, if I may.
Yeah.
You gave me 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to aim for 10. So I don't know if we're taking questions at the end or right at the end of the meeting, but
right at the end.
Right at the end. Fair enough. Okay. I volunteer with Climate Action Network West Midlands. It's a completely informal network of people and organisations campaigning for climate action. And what follows are my personal views, although the steering group have had a look at the slide deck. What I'd like to do tonight is try and aim to raise awareness of the climate emergency, the need to act urgently, and hopefully, especially through the discussion, the potential for stronger trade union action on the climate emergency. I'm just going to start my clock. Our survival depends on clean air and water, good soil, food supplies, and natural cycles that replenish all those free goods that we get from nature. And all those ecological services which sustain life happen in a very thin layer of atmosphere, water, and soil. And human activity is pushing these services to breaking points. So what we're talking about here is a climate and ecological emergency. This poster was displayed on a demonstration, pro-science demonstration, just shortly after Trump was elected in the USA in 2016. And I'm going to use these headings to structure what I'm going to say. So they are: it's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's very bad, and we can fix it. It's warming. Average global temperature has risen about 1 degree since the mid-19th century. That's called the pre-industrial baseline. And that rise is already leading to worse weather, to wildfires, to floods and droughts, more frequently and more extreme. We've seen extreme weather and wildfires in the Arctic, in Australia and Western USA. Despite that, it still doesn't get much media coverage. And these events, worryingly, are at the worst case end of the various predictions from climate models. And overall, they tend to make very conservative assumptions. So it could actually be worse than we think. And this is an example of what's been going on in the Arctic this year. Absolutely smashed peak temperature record in June of 37 degrees north of the Arctic Circle. It scares me. I don't know about you. It's us, definitely. Fossil fuel use, environmental destruction, and wasteful use of resources are basically baked into our society and our economy. We're outstripping the carrying capacity of the planet. When I say it's us, actually it's the rich north. So it's the people on this call, for sure, not necessarily personally responsible, but the way our society functions. The richest 10% globally are responsible for 50% of the, what they call total lifestyle emissions. So that's ignoring infrastructure. This is just what we consume to live. The poorest 50% are only 10%. But they're the people who are in the firing line when these adverse events like droughts and floods and so on occur. I'll come back to that point later. We're absolutely sure. Climate science is well established and extremely detailed. The models are calibrated to historic data, and there's no reasonable doubt that the warming we're seeing is primarily due to our emission of what are called greenhouse gases. So that's coal, oil, gas generating mainly CO2, some methane. I'm not a climate scientist. I am a scientist, but I'm not a climate scientist. And I'm not about to lecture you on climate science, but I accept the scientific consensus. And to quote Greta Thunberg, we need to listen to the science. In the meantime, the fossil industry has spent tens of millions, hundreds of millions, probably spreading uncertainty about the science. And ExxonMobil are being sued, not for ecocide, but for misleading their shareholders, because they've known about this for 30 years and they've been telling huge lies about it. It's bad. The climate models generally use 2100 as a baseline date for their forecasting. And the models predict the effect of different amounts of greenhouse gases on average temperatures around the globe, but also some regional variation. And those forecasts always have a range of probability, and they run and run and run the models many, many times to tweak the parameters and see what happens. If we carry on as we are, that's the yellow line, business as usual, we basically cooked the planet by 2100. Average global temperature rise of 5 degrees, and that equals catastrophe. The blue line is based on the proposals which were agreed at or after the 2015 Paris Climate Summit, which was a benchmark date, no doubt about it. But you can see that based on what's on the table, and most of it's not actually being implemented, worryingly, we're still headed for between 3.5 and 4 degrees. And if you can see my pointer, this bump here, this white line, is the range of variation. So the absolutely most optimistic assumption is that we're going to hit 2.5, and we could be way over 5. So what's on the table at the moment isn't good enough. The goals of the Paris Agreement are the green line. And they said, let's keep it to 2 degrees or below, and ideally we're aiming for 1.5. Even 2 degrees means millions of people will die. Let's be quite blunt about this. At 1.5 degrees, the damage is going to be severe, but probably survivable. That's what we've got on the table. So business as usual gets us to something like 4 to 5 degrees by 2100. And this chart shows the regional variations. We've already seen from earlier slide the massive warming in the Arctic, and that is a year by year occurrence. It's not a one-off in 2020. By the end of the century, the Arctic will be ice-free, and that has catastrophic consequences for the weather worldwide. There will be massive ice loss from land-based ice in places like Greenland and Antarctica, and that will lead to huge rises in sea level. That's when I say catastrophe, I mean catastrophe. To keep it to 1.5 degrees, we have to urgently cut carbon. That's what we've got to do. We've got to stop talking about it and actually get on and do it. There's some more information at that link there. I guess these slides will be shared, Naeem, where you can look at a chart, an infographic about the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees in terms of the impact on agriculture, fisheries, refugees, water supply, all the rest of it. So we can fix it if we get a grip. And cutting carbon means cutting our dependence on coal, oil and gas and changing our throwaway society. If we can do that, then our children and grandchildren will inherit a better world. In the words of Naomi Klein, this changes everything. We've got the technology, but so far, not the political will. Popular sentiment globally is way ahead of most political leaders, in inverted commas. And even the finance and business sector is starting to catch on. There is an investment in green tech and conservation and recycling and all the rest of it. Not enough, but it's happening. If we're going to stop burning this stuff, then we've got to keep it in the ground. And that is a specific global campaign, keep it in the ground. And the black circle in the middle is what we can burn and still stay below 1.5 degrees. The big red circle is what we've got to leave in the ground. Now, the trouble is, this is on known assets. That means that there's something like $22 trillion worth of stranded assets in the global fossil fuel industry. And I put it to you that that's one of the major reasons why they're extremely reluctant to do anything about this, because it's very, very bad for their business. Instead of burning all that stuff, we need to make major investments in renewable energy, energy conservation, circular economy, cutting waste, and so on. There's been a lot of talk recently about target dates for when this has got to happen. And basically, we've got to be, to keep below 1.5 degrees, we've got to be absolutely carbon neutral by 2050. And this won't happen on a straight line trajectory. What we've got to do is cut emissions as rapidly and as sharply as possible. And the take-home message is what we do in the next 10 years means life or death for millions of people around the planet. It's that simple. The international labour movement has been one of the main drivers in the movement for what's called a just transition. So this is climate justice for workers and communities who are currently dependent on fossil fuels. So the exact opposite of what was done to the UK mining community. And climate justice also refers to the poor and vulnerable people worldwide who are the first to suffer from the impacts of global warming. Now that commitment to just transition is very well thought through and very admirable, but it's not been extended to the sort of organised labour movement on the ground, and that's really the main purpose of what I'd like to say today. This is an old joke. What if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? There are huge co-benefits of climate action. There's another link to a recent report on these. And just to give one example relevant to the emergency motion just now, if you insulate homes, the right homes in the right way, then you can make a big dent in fuel poverty in all urban communities, which would make a big difference, practical difference to a lot of people. There are enormous job opportunities. For some years, there's been a campaign called 1 Million Climate Jobs, which again hasn't got a lot of traction from a practical point of view. And very recently, we've seen very diverse calls for what we call green recovery from COVID-19. And a lot of detailed modeling's gone on about where those jobs would occur and how long they would persist, what kind of skills are required and so forth. Again, not much happening on the ground to make that happen. The role of the council is critical. City level action is critical. These are recent sort of categories of things that the council could do based on a report from the council a few months ago. And those are my marks out of 10. After 15 months of talking, they've scored 13% in my view. And it's not just me. Definitely must try harder. It's a very disappointing outcome of 15 months of effort. As a result of that dismal showing, quite a broad coalition of trade unions and community groups of all sorts have supported this call to action for just transition. That's happened in the last couple of weeks, and it's posted on the Birmingham Against the Cuts website. So here's the sharp end. What can trade union power and resources do about this if we choose to act collectively? We're probably the mainstay of this argument for a just transition, especially protecting workers in sunset industries. There have been some union representation at the Climate Task Force, for example, but it's frankly tokenist, and it needs to be much stronger and more vocal. There's been very little work done on retraining and education for a sustainable economy. That's a big ask if we're going to create these green jobs. And we need to get money out of those stranded assets in the fossil industry in our pension funds and reinvest it in something sustainable and productive. We could have workplace climate champions. We could support the youth climate strikers. We could support green travel schemes in every workplace and school. We could renew the demands for affordable, decent, low carbon housing. Clean air is a very hot topic at the moment. And last but not least, we really need to leverage trade union power to get the media to tell the truth, because frankly, they're not doing their job. Final plug, 12th of November, thank you to the Trades Council exec for supporting this special meeting on climate, where hopefully we'll be able to talk about these things in a lot more detail. And hope that will lead to action. And obviously some changes in policy and leadership at regional level. Thank you.
Thanking Jules for the excellent contribution. Our next speaker will be Darren Matthews, a full-time officer for Usdaw Union, Shop Distribution and Allied Workers. Darren? Darren?
Might need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, unmute. Oh, it just lost his audio. Oh dear.
Oh, he's lost his audio.
Hello, Ian, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can hear you now, definitely, yes. Okay.
Sorry,
Darren?
sorry, Jules. Some of that presentation, you sounded like you went underwater. I think it might be my system. Sorry.
The work up there.
Okay,
Hear me
Darren.
okay here now?
Okay, Darren, yes, it's your turn now to speak.
All right. Well, thank you, Ian, for the invite, and James as well. Thank you for the invite, for allowing me to come along and speak to you for a while. Unfortunately, I haven't got any.
Can you unmute yourself, Darren?
Darren, unmute. Okay.
I think you did that, Ian.
No, I didn't. No, sorry.
Right, so, yeah, look, thanks for the invite, Ian and James. I don't know how I was up to. I haven't got any posh slides for you, so unfortunately you've got to just listen to me and just a few things I was going to say about Usdaw and the impact of what's going on in the last 6 or 7 months on our sector. So, yeah, I'm one of the full-time officers from Usdaw in the Midlands for 20 plus years now. I'm also the political officer for Usdaw in the Midlands, so sitting on the Labour Unions Group and the West Midlands Regional Board, etc. So I'm going to talk about some of the crisis that's affecting the Midlands in particular, as well as the UK, what's happening on the high street. Many of you will know many names that have gone to the wall: BHS, Mothercare, Thomas Cook, to name a few. I think at the minute, since 2018, there's been over 160,000 job losses in the retail sector. If you consider that to many other sectors, the auto industry, etc., the news that would get and the media coverage that would generate would be staggering. There's still a perception by the general public and the media that retail isn't important. They're not real jobs. It's jobs for a short period of time to when people get proper jobs. And we've still got a massive hurdle to overcome in changing that. There's an enormous amount of toxic rules that are holding back high street retail. The business rates are completely out of kilter to online retailers. There's very inflexible rent arrangements in the UK. The vast majority of rent reviews are legally binding, that they only go upwards and not downwards, that's why you'll find a lot of retailers pulling out of the high street because they cannot renegotiate the rental arrangements. Corporate tax avoidance, as you all know, is an enormous issue. I'll probably name and shame a few of them as we go along. So at the minute, the business sector in retail, it pays around £7 billion in business rates. And if you compare that to one company, Tesco, the year before last, it paid £700 million in business rates. Compare that to Amazon. I think we all agree Amazon's slightly larger than Tesco. Amazon paid £63 million in business rates. You know, less than 1/10 of the same of what Tesco paid. Footfall, as we know, in the last 7 months has virtually collapsed. Most people are now online shopping if they have to, even with food deliveries. So I think we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 months, especially with the end of the furlough scheme, there's going to be several, we predict 125,000 more jobs will go in the retail sector. Where do those jobs go to when other sectors are also cutting huge amounts of jobs? Some are saying 4 million. Our predictions could be that by the spring there could be 5 million people unemployed in the UK. Joe touched on it earlier, the effect it's going to have on housing, the homeless, mental health issues, domestic violence, etc., is going to be enormous if we carry on this trajectory of job losses and its impact. What we've been calling for about 18 months now is an online sales tax. We want to, working with some of the retailers, is trying to get a level playing field between the online sales companies and your bricks and mortar retail sales. It would raise tax revenue for the government, and it would give a level playing field and protect jobs in the high street. And as you know, many high streets now are becoming very desolate places with such a huge lack of investment, boarded up shops, etc. The coronavirus is just really accelerating what's going on. I think our statistics at the minute, Ian, is about 84% reduction in footfall since April alone. Lockdown has cost certainly non-food retail around just slightly under £2 billion loss in earnings and revenue. The resulting job losses: Boots, 5,000 jobs; Debenhams, 2,500 jobs; Marks and Spencer's, 7,000 jobs, again to name a few. The government have provided some help, as you know, freezing business rates, but they haven't gone far enough. I sit on a European Works Council, so I'm dealing with a lot of the unions across Europe. And when you realise what employment law and protections they've got, in particular Italy, Germany, France, where companies cannot make anybody redundant before December the 31st, you realise across Europe their employment law is far, far better than ours in the UK. So we're saying the government's got to provide more support to local councils, more protection for the high street. Our campaign that we're running at the minute, along with some of the other unions, is called A New Deal for Working People. Investment in the high street, further support during the pandemic for jobs in the high street. And too many of these workers are losing their jobs. Don't forget, many of them are... I've seen the message. Naeem, can you not hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but some people are saying they can't hear it. So I'm asking the people who can't hear it, because it may be their own problem, really.
Okay. Well, I'll try and answer questions later on if anyone wants one. I'm not saying I can answer them, but I'll try. People in the sector, you know, they're on low pay. As we know, retail workers are low paid staff anyway. Very vulnerable often in their communities as well. The amount of the increase in mental health problems within retail has skyrocketed in the last 9 months. A survey in the West Midlands recently, 10,500 retail workers were surveyed, and we're finding over 50% are now missing paying their bills, electric bills, water bills, and are now getting into debt. And 63% of those are now finding that their mental health is struggling. This is just the West Midlands. This is just 10,000 retail workers that we surveyed. So there needs to be a new deal. We're asking for the £10 minimum wage along with other unions. The minimum contract being 16 hours. We know that many employers will give, because of the stigma around 0-hour contracts, many employers are now offering 2-hour contracts. and therefore they can deny that they've got any staff on a 0-hour contract. And then, of course, workers are beholden to their managers or local employer, in effect, to behave themselves, otherwise they won't get extra hours. So the pressure on those people doing extra hours, often in very difficult working conditions, is terrifying for many of these people. Universal credit, as we know, it needs to be fundamentally overhauled. There's problems with galore. I'm not going to go into it too much. You all know that, the difficulties. We probably know people who work in retail, and probably people who have suffered with the problems of universal credit. Ian, I'm going to move slightly on to one of our campaigns called Freedom from Fear. It's about the abuse in retail. And some statistics I hope will shock you. The increase in violence. Now, this is violence. This isn't abuse. This isn't shop workers getting, horrible comments made against them. This is reported acts of violence has doubled in the last 4 months. We are now seeing reported violence that a shop worker on average will be physically assaulted every 6.5 days. Since in the last month, so August to September, this figure's staggering. In the West Midlands, of 5,000 shop workers of information we had, 196 were physically assaulted in 1 month. Can you imagine that any other sector where that would happen and the media wouldn't do anything about it, don't report it, don't particularly care about it? Could you imagine that in nursing or in any other sector where you was having those statistics of people being assaulted? And they're the ones that are reported. Imagine the ones that aren't reported and the people that are verbally abused every day. Retailers are often slow to even highlight this. Many sectors have got signs up asking people to respect their staff. Abuse will not be tolerated. I'd ask any of you, when you walk around your Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda's, Morrison's, next time, you see if you can find one sign where this is on show. They seem to have a reluctance to do it. They feel that it offends their customers to put that sort of signage up, which is disgraceful. We have been negotiating with the employers throughout, the pandemic. A lot of the measures that you see in supermarkets, the social distancing, the queuing, face covering, etc., shoplifting. And what you're finding is the customers are blaming shop workers, as if they've come up with the policies, if they've come up with the signage or the queue system. So the abuse, still to this day, will be, all of us in Usdaw will be getting a huge amount of calls each day in terms of abuse and violence against shop workers. We put a motion to Parliament. An MP, Alex Norris, submitted a motion to Parliament on July the 7th. Every single Conservative MP voted against it. So in February and March, a retail worker was classed as a key worker. People were standing on the front doors, clapping them, saying thank you very much, along with the nurses. And in July, the Conservative government voted against a motion to put in law to protect further protections of shop workers. It was rejected. The bill went back to Parliament on September the 25th. The Conservatives rejected it again. So there's now a petition going, run by ourselves and a number of MPs, and 32 retailers. Large retailers are included in the campaign. And it is going back to Parliament on end of October, I think October the 30th, Ian. But what a message to people that the Conservative government voted against protecting shop workers. Why on earth would any government do that? So if anyone wants to sign a petition or help it, we're doing a lot in the online. The other unions and Labour Party supporting the petition. go on our website, click on the petition. We need 100,000, and then it can go back to Parliament again. And we've got to keep the pressure up, because it's disgraceful that people on the minimum wage, on low hours, are exposed to this sort of violence and abuse, on a daily basis. Terrible. I hope that's okay, Ian. I hope I've not waffled on or bored anybody.
No, if I can thank you for your excellent contribution, greatly appreciated. So,
that's okay.
Okay, right. We now have Danny from the Communication Workers Union. Danny, can you unmute yourself, please? Oh. Have we lost him, Naeem?
No, he's here.
Is he? Oh.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Okay, we can hear you.
Sorry, comrades. Sorry about that.
Can you switch your video on, please?
Yeah, 1 second.
Right.
Hi there, everyone. 1 second, sorry. Okay, sorry about that, comrades. Yeah, so I'm here to give a brief update on the CWU's campaigns around BT. Now, obviously, I'm not a member of CWU myself, which is a bit odd. I think you're all asking, but originally there would have been a member from CWU briefing you all on this. So, unfortunately, you received the sort of poor man's version. So, I won't be able to give you very much detail beyond what you can already read online, but I will give you a very brief update, if that's okay. So today marks the first day of national action that's been held by CWU. It's called the Count Me In campaign, and that campaign is raising awareness about the ongoing disputes that the union is having with BT. So I'm just going to very quickly run through some of the issues around BT's plans. So BTE and Openreach members are facing the biggest threat to their working future. So BT is basically playing ahead with a radical reorganisation of its business, and it's a complete reorganisation that's driven entirely by profit and not in any way driven by the needs of their loyal, hard-working members. So this is a major cost-cutting plan, and it's part of essentially a belligerent new management approach, which has been sweeping across the whole of the BT group. And manifesting itself in different ways across individual lines of the business. So to summarise very quickly, BT Group's reorganisation plans essentially entail a mass closure of many sites across the business, potential threat to voluntarism in leaving the business, a piecemeal approach to closure which lessens the chance of redeployment, undermining and ignoring agreements that protect pensions and voluntary redundancy terms, which is a major part of the dispute, and drastically reducing pay terms and conditions, etc., for multiple roles and grades. So it's another example of a company similarly taking advantage of the national crisis to essentially ram home changes to people's employment conditions and pay, similar to what we've seen with companies such as BA and others. So the CWU's position is clear. They have some simple, straightforward demands. They want to enter into negotiations with BT around increasing job security and maximising the number of UK direct labour jobs in BT, agree a centrally coordinated response to redeployment, which allows retraining and reskilling well in advance of any redundancy announcements, which is obviously a very good thing, maintaining decent pay, terms and conditions for all BT employees, and that involves changes to the grading system, pay and reward structures, creating a fair, enhanced voluntary redundancy package, reinstate the legally binding element of the pensions agreement, and minimise the use of contractors and reduce offshore work to maximise employment opportunities for UK BT employees. Now, obviously, this is an ongoing dispute. There are different takes within the union about what next steps need to be taken and whether there needs to be further action. But at the moment, it's a lot about raising awareness about the dispute, sharing solidarity with the CWU. So a number of people today have shared things online. videos, messages of solidarity as part of the Count Me In campaign, and you can easily follow that through Twitter, etc., if people are interested in following the campaign any further. So apologies for the brief and relatively uninformative summary there of the CWU dispute, and unfortunately asking me questions will be reasonably useless. But if questions do come up, I recommend we put them in the chat, and perhaps we can take them to the CWU to answer. But I won't be able to answer them myself. I'm a member of Unite, not CWU. So anyway, apologies for that, comrades. But there you go. That's the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy, for the short but informative little contribution you made. We are now in a position where we can take questions and answers. Now, as Naeem pointed out, please put your position on the chat line and you will be taken in strict order. Now, the first person who is indicated is Tony Foley. Tony, if you can unmute yourself, please, and raise the first question.
Richard Hatcher as well.
Yes, I know. Yes, I know. Tony, unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to ask Darren a question. It's about one of his members in Glasgow, because you said you're the political officer, and I'm wondering what action you're taking regarding Richie Vento, please.
I haven't got a clue. They are, because we're so regionalised, I've only can see what I see on social media chats, so I don't know what's happening in Scotland. I do know Richie well. I've pledged our support locally, what we can do for Richie. I don't know what's happening nationally or regionally up there.
So, well, apparently there's going to be pickets at every IKEA branch on Saturday, 12 o'clock noon. So I'm just perturbed as to how you're not involved in this.
I've not had anything down. That's all I can say. I've not seen anything today.
Right. Well, I think the Trades Council should have their banner there on Wednesday. I don't know if there's still a Coventry branch of IKEA, but this is the action being taken. I presume Wolverhampton will have their banner, and it's very lacking if the Trades Council are not supporting this.
Yeah.
In case people don't know, I mean, I'm sure Darren will fill you in, but Richie's been victimised. He's an IKEA worker in Glasgow, and he's an USDOR member. And in fighting for the rights of members under attack at IKEA in Glasgow because of COVID, you know, their sick pay and their conditions, he's been sacked. And that is, you know, that is victimization, and, you know, against one, we should all unite behind and support Richie. So that's why I'm raising it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Tony Foley. The next question is Richard Hatcher. Richard, can you unmute, please?
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to, excuse me, pick up on the very useful talk that we heard on climate change and some recent developments in Birmingham. Because, of course, on the 15th of September, there was a council discussion on its climate policy. This was supposed to be a plan, but it wasn't a plan. And a few days before, when it got published, a number of people launched a call for action, demanding more action, faster action from the council. And this got support from about half a dozen trade unions and the main climate organisations, including the one I was involved in, Climate Action Network West Midlands. And the important thing was that had the effect of forcing the council leadership to back down. They had to scrap, for example, their plan to postpone their date for zero carbon to 2041 and bring it back to the original climate emergency date of 2030. So this defeat for the present leadership's policy opens up some big opportunities for us. And in fact, one was yesterday, because the Sustainability and Transport Scrutiny Committee, which is one of the main ones, in fact, the only main one involved in the climate emergency, actually invited representatives of a number of climate active organizations to take part in their discussion. And this was a real step forward. And I was fortunately one of the representatives there. And I just want to say quickly, 3 proposals that I put forward, all of which were agreed by the meeting. The first was that the climate emergency affects everything the council does. And so it should be on the agenda of every scrutiny committee. And at present it isn't. And that's why very few councillors till now have actually been involved in the whole climate emergency debate in the council. So we need to open that up. Second issue is that there has been virtually no engagement with the citizens of Birmingham around the climate emergency. We have to open that up. And one concrete step the council could take straight away is to organise special ward meetings online on the climate issue, so that the issues can be presented to citizens in the ward and they can have their views expressed. And at the moment, they haven't had any opportunity for that. And the third proposal, which was also accepted, was concerned the question of jobs. I was thinking when I spoke about it, particularly of young people, although it applies to people of every age, and that is this: young people leaving schools now and over the coming months are facing a drastically changed economic situation in Birmingham. They need the maximum support to navigate their way through this new terrain. And that means they need support in knowing where to go for jobs, where not only which sectors are at risk, but where new green jobs are potentially there. So what I proposed was that we need some sort of task force or working commission with representatives of schools, FE colleges, employers, and the trade unions to actually develop a coherent system to help young people into those new green jobs that we want to see created. And the important thing was those proposals and others like them now find a hearing among councillors. And so it's a big opportunity for the Trades Council to also develop those practical, concrete proposals and call for action from the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Who would like to answer that, Darren or Jules? Would you like to answer that, Darren? Jules, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's a very good example of the kind of thing I was trying to get at on the final slide that I showed about what can we collectively do to mobilise the power of the unions. I know we've heard some really harrowing stories tonight about the attacks on working conditions, on employment, partly because of COVID and partly because of rapacious employers exploiting the situation to push through, like we heard last time about British Airways, draconian changes to terms and conditions, job cuts, and all the rest of it. So, you know, we need to push back. And my point I was trying to get across was that so far the involvement of organised labour in what's going on at city and regional level has been frankly tokenist. And the people who are commissioning these working groups and forums and all the rest of it and are not going to voluntarily give up power. So we have to push collectively for more seats at the table, more action, more investment that leads to a just transition. we're the only people who are going to be calling for a just transition. You can have as much renewable energy powered capitalism as you want, but they're not remotely interested in a just transition. They just want to stay in business. It's up to us.
Yeah. Ian, just quickly, Jules touched on it. It's about organising labour. The problem in retail, as any union that's involved in retail, is trying to get retail workers to join unions is incredibly difficult. And with the low percentage of membership in many of these companies, they know that it's at times a free-for-all for employers to do what they want, and they're getting away with it. Young people are probably, Jules, you're spot on, Stuart, in what you say in the question. Young people are the most victimised sector of the workforce at the minute. The vast majority have got no employment rights because they haven't got 2 years service. They're discriminated against in pay. We have an Equal Pay Act, and yet you discriminate against young people for their pay, and this is legally allowed. So every single twist and turn a young person faces in trying to get them early few years in the employment market, forget even trying to get on the housing ladder. That's a distant dream for the vast majority of young people now. Rent is completely extortionate. Anyone who's got children of that sort of age, anything around 20 plus, will know most of our children's the thought of getting a house and a mortgage, they don't even consider it. And you think this is them starting out in life. It's absolutely horrendous. The media have done their job, let's be honest. It's completely controlled now. Young people we speak to all the time, they don't know anything about trade unions, and they're just not engaged. So how we break that down and keep trying to get the message of being more united with the labour groups, with socialist groups, with the trade unions, in trying to raise the awareness of organised labour. It's the only way we're going to stand up to the bad bosses in any sector, but retail in particular.
Thank you, Gavin and Jules. The next question will be Stuart Richardson. Stuart?
Right, okay, thanks, Ian. I very much support Tony Foley's proposal that the Trades Council should try to support this nationally organised pickets and lobbies of iCare premises. I think you said 12 o'clock on Saturday. Unfortunately, I've got my National Education Union National Conference, so I won't be there. But I do think it'd be good if do that. But on Jules's point, I thought it was a very impressive presentation of information about the developing climate crisis. But I think what's important, and I agree with many of the points Richard Hatcher made, that we've got to try to involve the public in these discussions, is to make some very specific and concrete demands on the council, which I don't think was in that document circulated prior to the motion. For instance, let's give you two examples. There are tens of thousands of old, poorly insulated terraced houses in the east of the city, Small Heath, and where a large section of the working class and ethnic minorities live. The government actually is opening up funds for retrofitting insulation of housing. The council could have a major campaign and show the relevance of climate change to improving the insulation of these tens of thousands of houses, benefiting working class people. Secondly, you could say demand that the council, all its vehicles must be electric vehicles, So let's make some very specific, concrete examples. The other thing I was rather disappointed in, just finishing here on this by Jules' contribution, there was no mention of the clean air zone. Now, the clean air zone is probably the major bit of environmental action that the council is taking. It's going to affect ordinary people. And the Birmingham Trades Council has got some very clear policy on this, and we've discussed it before. And hopefully that policy can be reflected in the meeting on the 12th of November, which is, yes, we're in favour of a clean air zone with getting rid of the particles and nitrogen dioxide in the air. but charging poor working class people, many of them in routine jobs, £40 a week to travel through the city centre is a disaster, and that they should have a free bus service in the city centre, as Belgian cities like Gwent have, and they should build car parks around the clean air zone, you know. So I think we've got to, as the trade union movement, because it affects, I mean, we've had discussions in the NEU, lots of teachers drive across town to their jobs. They're going to be hit by these significant charges. And I think so we have to make the whole question of environmental thing relevant to our trade union members and relevant to working class people. So hopefully that whole discussion on clean air zone can be a major component of the 12th of November discussion meeting.
Thank you, Stuart. Jules, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, broadly agree with what you're saying, Stuart. I would extend the discussion to actually talking about, I think it'd be more productive to have a campaign around clean air for all, because the CAS is one tool in the box. I personally don't think it's the best tool or has been well applied, and I think we gain more support in general for a shift away from private car use, which is, you know, not something that a lot of people can afford or have access to a demand for clean air for all. And CanWM, for some time, when we're starting to ramp it up, have got a campaign for fare free public transport for the whole city. There are 100 cities worldwide that have implemented that. We struggled very hard to get that on the agenda in the council's task force, and it was rejected out of hand at first, and a last ditch attempt to get them to agree to do a feasibility study, which is in the consultancy report now. You talked about specific demands, and I agree entirely that in a 10-minute presentation you can't really go into that level of detail. There's an awful lot on the table. The issue is that the task force was set up, well, the original motion in June was to set up a task force and produce an action plan. And 15 months later, there is no action plan. There's a wish list, which is very long and very complicated. And it includes things like insulating houses. It includes things like electrifying the council's vehicle fleet and so on and so forth. But they're not doing anything. Or, well, they're doing very little, and it's certainly nowhere near enough compared to the extent of the climate crisis. That's the key point. It's not enough. Too little, too late. And we are making specific demands, and we are calling for greater participation right down to ward level. Unfortunately, the great deal of what we've been saying, not just CanWM, but a whole lot of other people on the task force and outside it, has been completely ignored. And you can have a long conversation about the reasons for that. The point is, at the moment, the collective power of the trade union movement is not being directed to pushing for more action which supports the citizens of this city. Not the elite who drive Range Rovers who come in from Solihull and pollute, you know, the Stratford Road or whatever. We're talking about the vast majority of the people in the city are not engaged, and they're not going to be the beneficiaries of any climate action that's on the table at the moment. We've got to change that.
Darren, would you like to come in on that one? Darren? Oh, Darren, if you can unmute.
Yeah, well, look, I appreciate you being put in a difficult position here, and I'm annoyed about that as well, because I asked you to do this on the basis of the thing.
Oh, Darren,
sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. Was that a question?
I think there's a bit of a problem. Okay. Can we take Pam next? Pam, would you like to raise a question?
Hello, Ian. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm afraid I missed Jules' presentation, and I only heard about it. But I wanted to say that I put forward a motion at our local Labour Party branch, which was passed forward to the CLP as well, where it was passed, and in fact strengthened by some of the members of the CLP, which is Hall Green, Birmingham Hall Green. And that has been circulated to all the other, apparently, to all the other constituency Labour parties, which was asking the City Council to as Richard said, to actually act, not just talk about what they're going to do, but actually act. And I feel that this is one way that we could get through to some of the local residents in each ward, via the ward Labour Party. Because although obviously not everybody in the ward is involved in the Labour Party, some people are, and they would committed people will go out and talk to their neighbours. So that's all I wanted to say at the moment. But sorry, the other thing is the statement that Richard was talking about, which is supported by some trade unions and some all the major climate organisations. If the Trades Council could add their name to that statement, I think that would be very valuable. And I'm hoping that all the constituency Labour parties will also add their name to that statement. I think it's been coordinated by Lisa Trickett. So anyway, that's what I'd like to say tonight.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Jules, would you like to come in on that? Then Darren. Jules first, then Darren. Okay, Jules?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Pam. It'd be really helpful to have a copy of the motion, and we'll certainly circulate that. And just on your point about the call to action, that was a kind of very time-limited thing to try and push the council for more action, and it did have some impact. CanWM and Lisa Trickett tried to sort of coordinate that, and it was quite remarkable in the space of a few days how many people came forward and endorsed it, which is fantastic. And we're now talking about the follow-up. So we're hoping that the 12th of November event, which is 2 hours dedicated to this, will be where we can have a much fuller debate and get more people engaged. And we're also in various ways, Richard mentioned one, and I was on the Labour group call the other day, trying to support, get council support for developing a kind of support package, if you like, for councillors to run events at ward forum level. Every ward, every councillor needs to be engaged with this, and we can grow from that at community level. So that's work in progress. We originally suggested that probably late 2019, and here we are in September 2020, and it's not happened yet. So we will keep pushing.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jules.
Okay. Pam, could you repeat your question for Darren's benefit, please? But I mean, a spot of technical issues. Pam?
It wasn't really a question, Ian. It was a few comments.
Well, if you know, for Darren's benefit, can you just quickly run over those comments very quickly?
Basically, to say that I had put a motion to our branch, local branch, which is Moseley and Kings Heath, Labour Party, which they passed, and it was then passed at the constituency. And it was to say that Birmingham should do more action rather than just talking, particularly not moving their date from 20,000 to 2041. And that's all really.
Darren?
I'm not sure what you want me to say, Pam, other than I agree with you, but it's not something that we're involved with the council. We'll keep an eye on it, and I'll see what we can find out and where our action is.
Okay. Any more questions, anyone?
Could I just say that I would be very pleased to forward my motion to anybody who wants it, but I don't have the email. Shall I send it to you, Ian?
Yeah, send it to me and we'll pass it on via Naeem. So we've got all the contact details anyway. No problem. All communications, Naeem secretary or myself. And we'll make sure everyone gets the emails concerned. Okay. Now, any other questions before we have other business? No. Okay.
Can I just ask one question?
Who is this?
Naeem.
Oh, Naeem, sorry. Naeem, go on. Naeem.
Well, I think as time is progressing at the moment, a lot of jobs are under threat. Is there any concerted or united action by the trade unions in the West Midlands to actually protect people's jobs under the present circumstances? So thousands have been announced almost on a daily basis.
Okay. Who would like to answer that question, Jules or Darren?
I'm not in a good position to answer that, I'm afraid. To my knowledge, there is no coordinated campaign. I'd love to see one. That would be fantastic if we could get all the main public and private sector unions to work together. I mean, this is really my point about the level of representation of the union movement in the Birmingham Task Force and the various forums at combined authority level. And it's extremely tokenist. And we need to be pushing really hard on the green jobs agenda, like practical stuff that actually leads to investment and new jobs to replace some of the jobs that are being lost, but also defend the workers in those threatened sectors, either because of loss of business because of COVID-19 or because of the direct impact of action on climate on workers and sectors which currently depend on fossil fuels.
Okay, thank you, Jules. Darren?
I guess just to add on what Jules, it's not just green jobs and the effect of the fossil fuel impact on jobs, but one of the things that I don't think the UK is preparing for is the onset of artificial intelligence and its impact it's going to have on jobs. We know that there is numerous trials across the UK and in Europe and in America where they're utilising artificial intelligence more and more. There are trials on staffless shops. And each time artificial intelligence takes a further step forward, it is just jobs being lost across not just the retail sector, but everywhere. Where are these jobs being replaced? Many people have argued with me, well, it's just the fourth industrial revolution. And I've said, well, no, because, in the other industrial revolutions, what happened was people moved from the fields where they ploughed to the factories making the tractors. The problem is now those jobs aren't there. They're being made in the Far East, in emerging markets, in Asia. So each time a checkout closes, that's one job gone. Each time a petrol pump is a card only, and everybody uses it, it is an extra job being lost. And we are sleepwalking into this horrendous situation. I don't know where we're going to be in 10 years' time.
Okay. Darren? Richard Hatcher?
All right, well, hang on, let me...
Yeah, if you can unmute, please, Richard.
We can hear you.
Richard, can you unmute? Okay.
Okay. Actually, I've lost the thread now of what I was going to chip in to add a minute ago. So let me back off for a minute while I think about it.
Okay. John Turtle, if you're going to unmute, please. John, can you unmute?
I'm bringing up a new subject on this question. It's related to COVID-19. Okay, and it's I want to draw attention to an article that appeared in the journal of the BMA, and it's called Outsource and Undermine the COVID-19 Windfall for Private Providers, which I think we've read a lot about. But this is a useful rundown on what's been happening in that area and the way things have been going on, money paid in specific providers, all fragmented in this kind of way. So, but the point is that the money that's being paid out and wasted and so on, it needs to go to the NHS. Now, I think this is all out. KONP has a resolution on this anyway. But one of the things, in actual fact, Arthur Scargill's daughter is a GP and a member of the practitioners group nationally. So, but she's saying that, look, practices already have capacity for dealing with injections and so on. Why can't they deal with testing? And it will cover the community effectively. So, what I'm trying to get out to people is support for all testing should be undertaken by GP surgeries. Now, I brought this up at the CCG locally, and a number of other things on this, because I've got concerns about how these organisations, when I take things to them, they seem to be undermining, they themselves within the NHS seem to be undermining. And one of the things that I brought up some time ago was this question of push doctors who set themselves up long before this, 2017, to actually go online. And you can, if you, it touted around, it used the surgery's name. So Handsworth Wood came up and I went to it thinking I was going to the practice and found out I was being offered online consultation to pay for payment. Anyway, I took this up with the CCG and with the practice, and they came back and they were equivocal about this and not too worried, but I didn't get anywhere with it. Anyway, the next thing I find is that as a patient of Handsworth Wood Medical Centre, which is part of Modality, it's called itself a super practice, which is national with 400,000 patients. They've now got an agreement with the push doctors, and their own doctors are actually doing are being paid for doing these extra work. So there's a big concern here that all this is happening and escalating, and the privatization is, again, it's another aspect of people, you know, COVID-19 is very nice. Let's have more big pandemics. It's like those asking for more wars, isn't it? Because it sells arms and so on. Well, you can do the same thing with prescriptions and things like that. And the whole, you know, again, it's an international problem, but all this is happening. So COVID is just a side issue. But what I want to ask is get support from groups like yourselves and from the unions. And I think we ought to be working on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, Richard, would you like to come back? Oh, sorry, apologies. Jules, would you like to reply to that? My fault.
Yeah, very briefly, thank you, Chair. What we've just heard about the AI and about the stealth privatisation of healthcare, and I spent 25 years in healthcare before I retired, and you can extend it to the climate scenario as well, these are very good examples of disaster capitalism at work. And
absolutely, yeah.
The people who with the money and the power and the organisation are frankly rolling all over us because we're not organised enough. They are exploiting all these situations to make more money and to consolidate their power. I was reading 2 days ago, there's a town called Queenstown in South Island in New Zealand, which is becoming the millionaire haven of choice. There are over 30 underground emergency bunkers in that city, and they've got a huge airfield full of private jets because the billionaire class are looking for an exit. When the, pardon my French, when the shit hits the fan, which it will, because of job losses and food shortages and water wars and all the rest of it, which will come if we don't get a grip of climate and if we don't fight back against this massive job cull that's going on under the umbrella of COVID, then they need a bolt hole. They already live in gated communities, but that's not going to be good enough. They want to be a long way away. So the only people who are going to actually organise the fight back is us. Organised labour, historically, is the only force available to counter this kind of disaster capitalism and their mentality. So it's up to us, guys. Sorry, people.
Thank you, Jules. Now, the final comments, please, will be Richard Hatcher. And Richard, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, okay. I'm muted. Yes, we are. Okay. I mean, the point I wanted to make, and I'll just make it very quickly, but is the role of education in actually everything we've been talking about. And you will have seen in the papers that the government has issued a proclamation that you are now not allowed to talk in schools about anything that poses an alternative to capitalism. I mean, this is an extraordinary development. It's like Trump in the United States, and they've issued it, and we have to fight back against it. But it applies very strictly to the issues we've been talking about tonight. The climate issue is an issue about whether the planet can survive under capitalism. And this is an issue that has to be raised in the schools. For goodness sake, the kids are out there on strike in the streets. It's the responsibility of the schools now to actually respond to their concerns, and it should be an integral part of the education system, all the way from primary, all the way through to university. So it's very worrying in that context that even though I put forward last December a proposal for a climate action week every term in every school in the city, we have not had in the climate task force one single discussion about education. And the workshop that was planned on it never took place. So there's a task for us there. But also the issues that have been raised about shop workers and violence that they face and trade union rights are also key issues that need to be there in the curriculum. So now we're in the process of trying to put kids' schooling back together. And we've got to make sure that those ingredients are central to it over the coming year. Thank you.
Okay, thanking Richard. And thanking everyone else who has participated tonight, including the speakers. Some of them have had to leave early because of other appointments. I wish you all a safe night at home and look forward to meeting you all again fairly soon.